Hello everybody and welcome back to the r/civ Battle Royale Mark II. I'm your narrator Burgerkrieg, reading the slides prepared by Pilgrim with a Y, your MC for today by the grace of our wise overlord and submarine captain TPang. Some of you may remember him for a series of analyses on the ever-dwindling frontiers of unclaimed lands back in times that are now almost prehistory for this world. Today, every scrap of land has been claimed, populated and industrialized. Nature has been subjugated and more recently even the atom has been split. And so the only changing frontiers nowadays are those between warring nations, and what a spectacle that is. Gaze upon the world as we last saw it, chronicled by the tireless hands of Cylon L and Laxarax Ariskel. Don't get too used to it though, things are about to change big. Let me also use this opportunity to thank all the contributors of original content and discourse at our dedicated subreddit r/civ Battle Royale, who make the wait between each part much more bearable. Here you have the top player according to the power rankings. No surprises honestly, the Burs are a bona fide superpower and it's going to take incredible effort to dethrone them. Without further ado, we dive in. The Grand Inuit Glacier keeps its slow but unstoppable descent onto Texan lands. Corpus Christi has fallen and snow-covered helicopters keep the cities of Sisseton and Puebla in the red for the approaching land forces. In the meantime, the Canadians are managing to stall the glacier's advance, even as Quebec City flips again. A nearby Maple Leaf force will be able to recapture it soon, no doubt. In the South American theater, we see Henry Morgan's navy efficiently eroding the Incan coastline, making a mockery of the previously lauded Chilean backdoor squad. On the Brazilian-Chilean war front, we see a war fought chiefly with planes, as several cities go into the red with minimal attrition from land forces. However, Bernardo O'Higgins manages to use his navy to recapture the city of Catamarca, while a Great War infantry sneakily attempts an incursion into La Rioja, Argentina's former and last capital. A simple worker, head filled with dreams of heroic deeds, tags along. Let's not forget that Morgan and Pedro II are also at war, however neither civ seems to be giving the conflict the relevance that we at the BAP sub expected. A tiny convoy of buccaneer ships, including a newly minted ironclad, makes a token effort at the Brazilian city of Manaus, while the main corsair force remains in a drunken stupor at the Caribbean headquarters. Pedro, now sporting submarines of his own, easily swats down the interlopers. Agent Semiramis, stationed at the Icelandic capital, learns that Ingolfur Arnason is plotting to erase the last trace of the once proud Ashanti people. A humble pikeman, or is it Ozai Tutu in disguise, who's now making a peaceful living incognito as a fisherman within the Bur Empire. This is such an unlikely development that it puts Semiramis' reliability in doubt. While Pedro's massive army stands back and looks, Chile manages to recapture Neuquén. La Rioja also falls to that single GWI and his worker sidekick, who is trusted with the defense of the city as the infantry leaves to recruit more would-be heroes among the once Argentinian workers. After a blindingly fast and successful campaign against Argentina, the Brazilian forces seem to have relapsed into their traditional incompetence, allowing the clearly outnumbered opponent to take the advantage. A glance at North America's heart confirms the expected. Quebec flips again while the Inuit continue their relentless advance on Texas. But what is this? It seems that in Sam Houston's hour of need, an unlikely yet invincible hero has heeded the call. Chuck Norris himself joins the fray. My man Inuit, you've gone and done it now. Now for a checkup on the Oceanic War, not much seems to have changed except for city ownership for the umpteenth time. Thank Nebby for the good people keeping track of city flips. I myself gave up long ago. On the sidebar we see yet more superpowers, Brazil and the Inuit, plotting to eradicate all traces of dying and or dead empires, like Japan and Rome, from the world. Similarly, Lester B. Pearson, host of the United Nations, squanders a proposal in screwing a small empire on the other side of the planet instead of using it to cripple his invading foe. The Maori join the Oceanic War! ! 1! ! 1! ! Oh wait, They're not declaring on the next door neighbor Australia, as we've begging them to do, but on faraway Vietnam. Insert Picard facepalm here. This, distressingly for our bloodthirsty interests, suggests that Henry Parkes and Te Raupahara are BFFs, or at least drinking chums. Even though Vietnamese forces seem a bit thin now, they are being successful at recovering and holding their ex-Philippine islands, and even harrying some of Australia's formerly Japanese colonies. Seemingly having learned a painful lesson, this contingent sports some cavalry instead of their infamous Viet Cong units exclusively. Apparently inspired by the Te's DOW, Amoratha declares war on Vietnam. It seems suicidal at first, given Vietnam's proven ruthless efficiency and diplomatic savvy, and the wide technological gap between the two civs. However, and surprisingly, Burma seems to have the denser unit carpet in the zone, after the Trung sisters have exhausted their own in the war against Australia and the Champa. Even so, it's hard to get one's hopes up for Burma. Another war between neighbors. Oh wait, it's between the Mughals and Sri Lanka, so nothing to see here, people. These two have proven time and again to have a mere sibling rivalry that sparks an unexciting lame slap fight every other century. I expect nothing different from this iteration. On the other hand, Sri Lanka's war with Arabia seems to be going somewhere. Even though they still lack actual units in the zone, their very respectable air force is keeping Arabia's desperados at bay, while also whittling the nearby city of Najran down to zero. Hopefully, Parakrama Bahu will send some city-taking reinforcements to the region soon. Surprisingly, Henry Morgan is having a hard time holding his gains on the Incan coast. It seems that Pachacuti is not going down without a fight. However, even though both his army and Morgan's navy seem similarly reduced at the moment, we know that Morgan has a massive batch of corsairs and ironclads lurking just out of sight, one screen north. Basically, Pachacuti's continued existence hangs solely on Morgan's whim, or rather his state of drunkenness. In another of the now common dual DOWs, the Champa declare war on the Mughals. Not that that is going anywhere, what with the lack of open borders with Sri Lanka and the rather suspicious wave of Sri Lankan privateers nearby. Nevertheless, Chebonga would do better focusing on his current war against the Trung sisters, as Indrapura is taking heavy damage, and my son seems to be following. Speaking of the Trung sisters, no action seems to have taken place between them and Burma yet. However, they have greatly increased their military presence in the region. The Incan Pacific holdings flip for the nth time, reducing them to shanty towns and filthy hovels. It won't be the last time either, unless Morgan forces Pachacuti into a greatly disadvantageous truce. As our previous commenter rightly pointed, distance is no longer a relevant concern for advanced civilizations when waging war, as Finland proves, grabbing Jericho from Arabia with paratroopers alone. However, it's still too early for these remote wars to be more than a proof of concept, as the unsupported city will be easily flipped in a turn. A bit to the left, we see Hannibal continuing his suddenly successful campaign against the Ayyubids, quickly halving Baalbek's HP bar, while a great musician looks on and weeps. After seeing his war against Leonidas slow down to a stall, Gustavus Adolphus inconsequentially DOWs Vietnam to pass the time. That one is too far even for paratroopers to bother. The Trung sisters are amused by Gustavus's gesture and pass down the DOW baton to Lester B. Pearson. Not sure that Lester will humor this little game by DOWing the Boers or something when the situation at home is so dire, even if he is managing to hold for the time being. On the Texan Inuit side of the war, we see Baltimore about to fall, making of San Antonio the next clear objective. Puzzlingly, a big battalion of Texan units, including the mighty Chuck Norris on the rear guard, seems to be heading away from the battlefield and into the secluded city of New York. Has Sam Houston given up hopes on most of his empire and plans to make a last stand at the Big Apple? The Oz-Kim War rages on, almost monotonously at this point. It's Park's turn at the swing, aka the Red Fort, and so it goes. My turn now, says Jandamara, shoving Parks off Bindyadanga and jumping on the swing himself. And so it goes. This war similarly keeps being waged among the two man-children over their island holdings with no real gains for either nation. More interestingly, the Trung sisters have taken over Indrapura, and Tili Binai has taken damage. After an unexpected reversal at the beginning of the war, damn Viet Congs, we see the Vietnam we know and love racing through Champaland at great speed. It may be time to be readying those well-polished Fs for Che. On the other hand, their war against Australia has come to a stall. You could believe that this was the exact same image as several slides ago, but the sidebar notifications assure us that yes, time has indeed passed. Yet this region seems frozen. What is this? Has Sam Houston secretly learned cloning? We have two Chuck Norrises side by side marching onto the Inuit front. It is a bit distressing though that they seem to have taken some damage. Are the Inuit packing atomic bombs already? I cannot imagine anything else putting a dent in Norris. Or maybe, was it the cloning process? Does it work as some kind of meiotic halving? Back at the South American theater we see more wars coming to a stall. Morgan flips Incan cities yet again, which will flip again, while Chile manages to defend their latest gains. Several Brazilian cities have been airbombed into oblivion, but there's no way for O'Higgins to capitalize on it without paratroopers. Kuchum Khan has entered the atomic era, as though he wasn't already frightening enough, and we get a peek at his core lands. Hopefully, harboring that Roman unit will not put him on a QNIX blacklist. We also see Canada reclaiming the mythical land of Sarnia from the Inuit. I believe this is the northernmost Canadian recapture in at least two parts. Pedro finally deigns to make a move with his overwhelming army, and the result is an easy capture of two cities. Why can't you be like this all the time, Pedro? Thankfully, the Chilean dynamic duo of GWI Man and Worker Boy managed to clear out La Rioja before it fell. Several things have happened on the dawn of this new turn. On one hand, Yakutia and Burma have reached a truce agreement, which is irrelevant, but so did Carthage and the Ayyubids. The Ayyubids surrendered Dvin to the assailing Carthaginians as the price for peace, according to the minimap. That's right, friends. Given the chance of surrendering one of their two heavily citadeled and almost dead Ethiopia-provoking cities, they gave away the undamaged, pristine Suez Channel. On the other hand, that Sri Lankan privateer carpet threateningly looming over the Champan borders was indeed a sign of things to come. Parakrama Bahu wants a bite of that cake before the Trung sisters clean it out. Oh, and Yakutia, again irrelevantly, also DOWs the Champa. Is it me, or do the words Yakutia and irrelevant always find themselves in the same sentence part after part? Also, we finally get to see some action on the Viet-Burmese front. Amaratha shrewdly or cowardly, take your pick, sends his forces south against Vietnam's weakened and almost undefended new acquisition of Indrapura, giving a wide berth around the much closer 81 defense Vietnamese city of Bago. Oh ho! Payback is a bitch. Korea, emboldened by their successful Manhattan Project and their absurd carpet of submarines, have decided to finally retake by force that city that they once were intimidated into giving Vietnam, and maybe some more. With the ink still wet on the DOW, Busan is already in the yellow, and Hue has started taking damage. The Trung sisters, in their hubris, left the north part of their empire entirely undefended, and it is up for the taking. Another relevant war? Well, depending on whether or not Crowfoot manages to get open borders from a QNIC. If he does, that may prove to be the straw that breaks the proverbial Canadian camel's back. Harun al-Rashid decides to get serious about this war with Sri Lanka and sends the best and most of his army to the Oman tip. Parakrama Bahu seems unfazed, as his cities stand strong despite the minimum presence of defending units, and keeps bombarding the nearby city of Najra. On the sidebar, we see that Champa managed to convince Vietnam to stop their assault, but the minimap suggests it came at the cost of a city, as it's usually the case for the enemies of the Shrewd Sisters. And back to the Oskim War Theatre. After countless city flips, a pattern is starting to emerge. Notice the clear west-east divide between burgundy orange and green gold, as the red fort goes back into Park's grubby hands. As you can see, the east-west divide pretty much keeps going up north into the Pacific, where Vietnam has been helping Jandamarra keep the Socceroo forces from extending. I honestly don't see things shifting too much after this, with Australia controlling the Central Territory and east coast of the continent, plus the island of Papua New Guinea, while the Kimberley control the west coast and most of the East Indies not controlled by Vietnam. Yet another almost photocopy from previous slides. The only difference is that an Australian reinforcement contingent that had been waiting on the borders has finally joined the fray. Not that it will make much of a difference, while a smattering of Blackfoot units approach, seeking another chance at an easy snipe. It seems unlikely that Australia will hold the ex-Japanese islands for long, but the Trunk sisters better realize that the moment they capture them, Sejong will jump in to dispute them, with his indisputable naval superiority. It may actually be a good idea to make peace with Henry Parkes and quit while they're ahead. Back to South America, we see that our unlikely duo of Chilean heroes have managed to retake La Rioja, a fated to be short-lived victory and worthless in the big picture, but O'Higgins should be glad for the morale boost, especially given that he may now kiss goodbye any chances of ever recapturing the Incan coastal cities. Speaking of which, a tiny contingent of the Hawaiian Peacekeeping Corps sweeps in to let Tiwanaku remain Incan for another day. But is it wise of Kamehameha to incur the ire of such a powerful nearby naval power? In North America, things are getting dire for the non-indigenous civilizations. Winter is riding in on Inuit shoulders deep into the Texan core, threatening to put an end to summer forever. Puzzlingly, the combined strength of two Chuck Norrises is not single-handedly driving the invaders away. Wait a minute. Those are just two run-of-the-mill Texas Rangers. It's just a UU that replaces the cavalry and grants culture and golden H points for each enemy unit defeated, which I don't think is Sam's main concern right now. We can only hope that they possess a fraction of Mr. Norris's mettle. Nope. These Texan Rangers were not able to pull off a roundhouse kick. True, they are facing off against helicopters and tanks, but you know that wouldn't even give pause to the real man. Now, the city of San Antonio lies unprotected to the advance of the White Walkers, and Sam Houston's namesake city seems to be next. In the meantime, the thick of his army cowers on the unthreatened cities of New York and Dallas. You know, if I were Benito Juarez, I'd consider swinging in to rescue his old Texan nemesis. Sure, he could also DOW him and try to get a few cities before the Inuit exterminate them all, like the Blackfoot did to Canada, but I think that helping remove that icy stalactite tip from within North America's metaphorical chest should be a priority, lest the whole continent suffers frostbite in a little while. And here we get another shot of the heroic efforts of Canada trying to wrestle away the polar bear's grip over Hudson Bay. Both armies look rather thin at the moment, but in the Inuits' case it's more of a result of having concentrated their troops down south than of production exhaustion. Crowfoot seems to have indeed obtained open borders from McCunick, but he doesn't seem to be mobilizing any units towards Canada yet. Now for a quick look at the European side of the Icelandic Empire, we learn that Ingolfur is amassing a respectable air force facing across the English Channel. Napoleon is currently parading his two UUs on the other side of it, but they will prove near useless when, not if, Ingolfur starts raining death from above. A long time ago, Stalin colonized the barren and frozen coasts of the Kara Sea. So strong was his desire of having a seaside vacation home. Unfortunately, all those cities fell prey to the Sibir menace. Kekkonen, always the altruist, has taken pity on him and decided to bring the ocean to Stalin, an uninterrupted sea of highly advanced clear blue units that are about to become even more sophisticated as Kekkonen enters the atomic era. Stalin must be reconsidering the Marxist stance on religion, as only divine intervention can now prevent the incoming tsunami. What do you know? The Trunk sisters did reach a truce with Henry Parkes. As far as I can tell, no cities have changed hands in this deal, so the sisters at the very least retained their late gains. Back at the time of the Wobbegong Armada's peak, we wouldn't have believed that another country would get the better out of a naval confrontation with Australia. We were wrong. And here we see the spoils that Vietnam got from the Champa. Actually, wait a second, what is going on here? Indrapura did fall under Burmese occupation? Is this Burma's first ever city capture? Going back on topic, we can now clearly see that the city of Lam Ap 4 is the one given away in the peace deal. A hint of the Sri Lankan navy is arriving from the west, only to be blocked by that city's borders. Surrendering it to the Vietnamese may have been a very shrewd move, Chebonga. Too bad that your empire is now a super narrow strip of land and sea. Moving a bit to the west, we get to see what's left of the Champa navy scramble to contain the approaching Sri Lankans. They seem matched both in numbers and technological development, so I don't see anything coming out of this other than the gruesome squander of human lives. The Siberian Girl Scouts Corps descends upon the scene like vultures, peddling cookies to both sides. Further to the west, we find that Carthage now borders Arabia and Armenia. Who would have thunk? The Ayyubid Empire is now reduced to 2 heavily citadeled and disconnected cities, summing no more than 10 tiles between them. Selassie could easily snack on them, but doing so would unnecessarily elevate his warmonger penalty, possibly attracting the undesired attention of the giant next door. In other news, despite the decent carpet of Arabian units nearby, the Sri Lankan city of Batticaloa has barely taken any damage. What the hell, Harun? You have a few planes too, use them. Back to the almost completely Australian continent, we find out that Jandamara has put his destroyers to good use, recapturing Binyadaga and the Red Fort, and capturing for the first time the little isle of Launceston. With nary a trace of the famed Wobbegong Armada around, and the thick of the Australian land forces marching northwest against Rubibi, the Kimberley may have recovered the Red Fort for good. If the Finnish troops constitute a sea, the Inuit forces are an endless ice sheet, threatening to initiate a new ice age, starting with old foe Taigen Da Khan, as the Fair M finds out. It's frightening to consider the damage that they have wreaked in North America with a force a fraction as big as this. Te Raupahara has entered the atomic era. Is the nuclear bomb the advancement they've been waiting for to declare war on Parks? Sooner is better than later, Te. Back to North America, we see San Antonio breathing its last gasp. More terrifyingly, a Kunik has reached the information era. This is a very telling slide. I'm almost positive that if we ran it just by the numbers, the combined armies of the 4 visible non-Inuit civs would be incapable of defeating the visible Inuit army, let alone the carpet of destroyers and helicopters chilling out in the North Pacific. In a blitz of submarine fire and paratroopers, Korea has recaptured their old city of Busan. Moreover, Hue is on its last legs, and the nearby Vietnamese contingent doesn't seem strong enough to defend or recapture it. This was remarkably quick for a civ with no planes, which is surprising given Korea's technological advantage, but possibly explained by a lack of oil. If Seong manages to retain that momentum, he may be able to quickly grab several cities and sue for peace from a superior position before reinforcements arrive. Apparently, at some point, Pachacuti rallied his troops and managed to recapture 2 of his coastal cities. Such off-screen glory was short-lived, and our gaze returns just in time to see him losing those cities again to marauding buccaneers. Slightly to the south, it seems that Chile has managed to hold onto La Rioja, even as an enterprising Incan lancer attempts a snipe, and the minimap reveals that they have also recaptured Catamarca. Julia Gillard, Australia's first female Prime Minister with hair red as the desert sands, calls on her people to be ever vigilant, ever brave, and to keep moving forward. A shot of the Bay of Bengal reveals that the Sri Lankan city of Anuradhapura has taken a tiny bit of damage. In the sea, both civs privateers are also duking it out unproductively. The Mughals seem stronger on land, while the Sri Lankans seem stronger on the sea, and yet, Akbar decided to initiate hostilities on a coastal city. Against all odds, plucky Canada stands its ground and recovers Regina, though this may be less a result of Canadian Army's prowess and more of a result of a Kunik focusing his forces on the disemboweling of the Texan core. This turn of good luck for Lester B. Pearson may prove ephemeral, as his previous ally against the Inuit, Ingolf the Viking, seems to be eyeing the fabled lands of Vinland, currently under Canadian rule, for an early retirement home, according to Agent Semiramis. San Antonio has fallen, and Houston, the city and probably also the leader, is taking great damage. As a baby blue helicopter arrives to Gonzales, the distressing nightmare of an Inuit Caribbean holding congeals into plausibility. With rumors of Sam Houston having been deathly wounded, civilian and militia alike throw themselves into the sea, desperately running away from the unstoppable glacier flattening their lands. Heartbreakingly, there's not enough room in the sea for all of them. This may be the saddest image I've seen in the whole BR2. In the meantime, the band of half-hearts and deserters that turn tail from war keep crowding the city of New York, huddling for comfort against the comparative safety of the Canadian borders. Talks of secession run the streets. Emboldened by the surprising success of his land invasion of Portugal, Henry Morgan attempts the conquest of the insular city of Ollantaytambo with a mere artillery, plus air support from the planes stationed at Campeche. It's actually working. Pachacuti's incompetence appears superhuman. A mandatory shot of the prosperous lands of China, thriving under the loving rule of the most anointed Mao. His latest boon for his loyal vassals, a great musician. What a great and wise leader you are, Mao. Hue is now sporting Spider-Man colors, and Hang Hong will follow shortly. Beijing is proving to be a slightly harder nut to crack, but Seong has the relief troops to keep harassing the city once the small and apparently last line of Vietnamese defense falls. Henry Parks has found his second wind, recaptured the Red Fort, and now finally cracked the city of Rubibi, the Kimberley's original capital, all the while still looking strong on land. Reinforcements from Jandamarra are arriving from the sea, but they may not be enough to keep the city after the few customary flips. Sure enough, the Australian land forces have earned their nickname, the Gravediggers. Flips all over the place, even among the old Indonesian and Philippine islands. A few more flips and these hash browns will be done, just like the Aussies like 'em. A liberal coating of Vegemite will follow. Here we see all those cultural bonuses from the Australian Civ in play. Too bad that at this pace there's not going to be much left of the Kimberley to become fully influential. The last Zulu workers finally found land after taking to the sea long ago, fleeing his war-torn home. Sadly, he's about to find out that this newfound land is similarly war-torn as Chile and Brazil battle fiercely for the possession of Eva's old cities. Unbeknownst to the Zulu worker, a Boer worker is shadowing him. Does Paul Kruger suspect that this is in fact Shaka himself and wants to keep an eye on him? The once bold and strong contingent that Harun al-Rashid sent to cleanse the tip of the peninsula from pesky Sri Lankans is now badly reduced, while their target of Batticaloa stands strong. Worse, a privateer managed to sneak into the air-bombed city of Najran and capture it, while the once wise Caliph squanders its nights listening to over 1,000 tales. His empire slowly crumbles. Is it possible that Scheherazade is actually a Sri Lankan spy? And really, how weird is it for Harun al-Rashid to listen to over 1,000 tales when many of those have him as the main protagonist? In an uncharacteristic display of incompetence, the Trung sisters bash the best of their army inefficiently against the weak and wounded Burmese city of Indrapura, while taking huge losses from Korea in the north. What the hell, Vietnam? Much more predictably, the Mughal-Sri Lankan conflict is going nowhere fast. Morgan tries sending some infantry into the weakened Ollantaytambo. It's super effective. Man, this land war thing is much easier than I thought it would be, thinks the old buccaneer in an American accent, while quaffing another gallon of rum for breakfast. Incidentally, in the meantime, the Inca have managed to reclaim the smoldering wreckage of their coastal cities. Morgan is unfazed because he knows that won't stick. Paul Kruger finishes the Great Firewall, closing their information doors even on us, the Great Babylonians. However, with such a ridiculously impressive carpet of highly advanced units, we need no spy to divine Kruger's intentions. No one will be safe ever again. And with that vast and ominous death force in the background, we take a look at some stats. First, the Boers expectedly take the lead on population, followed by the usual suspects. Since most of the cities under dispute in the Oceanic War are Kimberley, Australia remains in a strong third position. Which is the same reason why the Kimberley have dropped all the way down here, even if Jandamarra recovers most of his cities before securing peace, is already the big loser of this war. Armenia and Burma are also here, despite their successful military campaigns of late. More of the expected, though Australia took a significant hit. Korea's military power is almost the same as their huge neighbor Yakutisha's, while Vietnam is nowhere to be seen. Seong may yet become one of the top players in Asia, a collection of the defeated and soon to be defeated, with the exception of our glorious and immortal civilization. Australia is slightly behind in technologies than their closest neighbors and about to fall off the top screen, but they have recently made a good case of bronze, or rather production, over brains. And yep, as we can see, they are just slightly behind the current world leaders, the Boers, in production. However, neither of them can compare with Kuchum Khan's production, who apparently found unobtainium under the steppes. Kekkonen should be concerned that his civ is not in this screen, with Sibir sitting next door. The faithful followers of Judaism will carry David's legacy long after his death. But now, without the continuous outpour of missionaries from Jerusalem, it has little hope of overtaking Catholicism. In the meantime, whatever few followers Islam had amassed over the fall of its holy city are already deserting the belief. In the sidebar, we're informed the Kimberley's original capital has fallen again. We say goodbye for this part with a religion map. Afghanistan, Burma and Chile are the only nations left in the world that persist in atheism, but it's a losing battle. This was Burgerkrieg, narrating slides by Pilgrim. It was his pleasure to do this for you, and he welcomes any criticism that allows him to do a better job next time. I do not, because I am perfect. Let's mellow this out with a final round in Club Loser, an establishment created by JRU247.